I think this one pretty much speaks for itself, doesn't it?
Topical.
And how you can put the two together, where Spielberg basically reinvented the monster movie / horror twice.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think we're going to start with Jurassic Park. Okay, first off, there was a lot of build up to this, to my understanding. I don't know, I was like 2 or 3 when it came out, but
I remember the build up for this movie.
And the idea that this was going to be the first time that we had really see. I mean, there had been like dinosaurs in movies, but not to this extent, or this making people feel like they actually existed on camera and they are seeing it firsthand. So this was a really big fucking deal when it came out, to say the least.
Very true.
Now the question was the quality of the movie itself going to live up to all that? Live up to the effects and the anticipation and just all that in general. And I would say it most likely did for most people. There's probably 1 or 2 disappointed people there. And despite what you may think my opinion of this is, given the Jurassic World review, no, it's not going to be like that. And I don't just say that out of fear. I mean it sincerely.
Here we go again.
So, as far as the characters are concerned, they're not, I wouldn't necessarily call them paper thin or anything, but the characters played by Samuel and Laura Dern are, let's just say this movie's not exactly completely about the characters, per se. And that goes for the child characters as well. Where they're not completely dismissed, but they are more or less here just so they can be in peril later. With a couple of exceptions. Obviously, there is one particular character in this movie that a lot of people still take to. A character you may be able to possibly compare me to, because I can't seem to go one review without saying between my sentences.
It's nice when you're able to make fun of yourself. It's always fun to do that.
So, of course, any time I say in the middle of a sentence in regards to Jeff Goldblum, it's not intentional.
No, it's not. What's your chaos theory, AJ?
So, we're introduced to him, and he's very abruptly introduced. He's just kind of on the helicopter with them when they're on their way there. And he's just a mathematician that really is kind of under the impression that this is a bad idea. So he has that really great line about, we never thought about if we should, just because we can. So he's really kind of the breakthrough character of this movie, the one that everybody remembers, and it's probably why he's the sole person to come back for The Lost World. Because when, Sam Neill did come back for Jurassic Park 3, and so did Laura Dern, I think. Mm-hmm. But by then, nobody cared. So the thing about it is, pretty much every scene that he is in is a memorable scene in one way or another because of his presence.
Oh, yeah.
Like, going through a vague outline, I could probably say something about every single scene that Jeff Goldblum is in. It probably doesn't help that they take the character that's most, that's kind of the audience favorite, and for the entire second half of the movie, he's incapacitated. That kind of seemed like like maybe an move, but it happens. It happens to the best comedic side characters. So, and the thing that Goldblum did that was so great about this character is, even though that's pretty much the way he talks in real life, Goldblum was able to take this character and do this thing with his speech patterns, where he put in the middle of mid-sentence and between sentences. And when you do that voice with the uhs in there to anybody, pretty much anybody can tell you who the actor is and who the character is. And that's something that Goldblum does really well that I don't think he doesn't quite get enough credit for, because people do love him for that, but they never really realized that he was able to create a character that people know just based on one thing. They know his name and they know the character's name. And pretty much every line said character says. Like the whole chaos theory thing in the car when, who could have predicted that Dr. Grant would just jump out of a moving vehicle? Now I'm sitting here alone. Yes, so pretty much and that whole, even when he's first introduced, he does that weird thing that if it wasn't Jeff Goldblum would be an odd character trait that you would question. It's when he's kind of just talking to them in normal conversation, and he does that laugh that turns into like a growl. Nobody knows what the fuck that was, but we all just accept it as his character.
Oh, yeah.
And we love him for that. And that's, I think that's why Goldblum was really the breakout character of this movie. And of course, Attenborough was really great at being the enigmatic scientist, and obviously his deliveries in this movie make some of the really peak moments of the movie. It's kind of their starting point, is a line that he says or a delivery that he has. And the thing that really, really works about this movie, though, is there could be a couple of things said about it, as far as showing the dinosaurs. I know there is actually, despite the fact that the movie is really, really beloved, I know that there are some criticisms out there about the fact that we see the dinosaurs really early. There's really not a lot of build up to them. When we have the fantastic scene where that we just talked about in Ted, that they recreated directly, where he turns Laura Dern's head and she looks up, and they all have this look on their face, and it's really this genuine look that we see of them seeing the dinosaurs for the first time. And Attenborough says the "Welcome to Jurassic Park" line, and the music peaks, and we get the whole view, and it's one of the great movie moments. But the thing about that is, I like the fact that Spielberg didn't feel the need to build up to them, but just specific ones. The ones that are harmless are the ones we see right away, and are the ones just, running about doing their thing. The dangerous ones do get a build up. Because of the same scene, it's brought up that they have a T-Rex. And that's just kind of thrown out there. We know that that's probably extremely dangerous. We know it's probably a bad idea to have a T-Rex. But the fact that they have one is just thrown out there long before it's introduced. And that's just a fact that's known, that's just kind of looming throughout the movie until we get to him. And the way that he's revealed with it starts with the bouncing water in the cup, and then we hear him, and then we get like little glimpses of the way the camera moves in this reveal scene is perfect. And then it's just an unceremonious reveal of him behind them. I think there's a reason that's one of the most recognizable scenes, at least in the last 25 years. And I love the way he was able to take he didn't just complete. This is one of the movies you really, really have to look at when you are praising a movie for not completely going down the path of CGI. Because obviously, everybody knows this now. If you use too much CGI nowadays, it just looks animated and fake, and it's lazy, and people don't even put effort into making it look convincing. They just know that they can put it on the screen with CGI, and that's all they're worried about. But the whole mixture of animatronics and CGI in this perfect way that makes everything feel believable. There's still moments where it doesn't quite look like the actors are standing right in front of dinosaurs. But for 1993, this was as good as it was going to get, and it's pretty great as is, and it's still a lot better than the shit that's going down today a lot of the time. Because for some reason, everybody's so afraid of animatronics now. You think Spielberg would have been scared off them after his problems with Jaws, but it all came through and worked beautifully, thankfully. And the thing about it is, there is the plot in there with Nedry, with Wayne Knight's character, which is basically, it's really, I think everybody kind of knows up front, it's not really a movie about story. The thing with Nedry was really just a MacGuffin plot, so we could get to the fact that we needed a reason for the dinosaurs to be out and running around, and then it goes from there. That plot disappears without a trace once the dinosaurs are out. Mostly because Never's one of the first ones killed, but that's just the way it is. That's a really great scene, too.
Yeah, this Barbasol can lives on.
Yes. If you're going to do product placement, at least use it as a plot point. You don't have to shoot a Mercedes commercial. You just make it a plot element. That's all you got to do. Now there's and I love those. This is basically a movie where even in the slow portions, really, pretty much from beginning to end, is a scene that most people can recognize, even if it's out of context. You just kind of know, if you were to just see a single frame of a movie completely out of context, there's a pretty good chance you'd be able to guess it's from Jurassic Park if you've seen it. Because it's just so iconic and so recognizable. And a lot of this comes in. There's another human character that I like is Samuel L. Jackson. The way he... that thing that he has where he keeps the cigarette like on the very edge of his lip, like it's about to fall out of his mouth. But when he talks rapidly in like science talk, for some reason it never falls out of his mouth. Like it's just stuck there. So it's always nice whenever his character's on screen. Or, just one of his body parts, but still. But of course, this movie really, really, really reaches its greatness in its final moments. Pretty much starting with the kitchen and then forward. This kitchen scene also is a scene that I think most movie lovers probably know every frame of. Because pretty much every shot... Like, generally when you have famous movie scenes, there's always one particular shot that stands out. The kitchen scene in Jurassic Park, movie lovers pretty much know every frame of that scene.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Every single shot. Because it starts with, it's kind of a callback to the water, but still, it's the same effect. The Jell-O moving on the spoon. And then it goes into the whole, the distracting them with the soup ladle, and the one with the claw that clicks against the ground when he's looking for them, and when his head is just about to come around the corner of the counter, but he just barely doesn't see them. The coming through the door and they manage to shut it just in time, but he's still trying to get through the side. Just all of this stuff is ingrained in your memory forever once you've seen that scene, even just once. There's the shot where they're running away, and we see the shot from behind the dinosaur's legs as he's chasing them. Yes, the whole scene. When I describe these scenes, you have the exact image in your head of those scenes because you know them so well. Even if you probably don't even realize you know them that well until you're watching it, and you just remember everything. And the fact that the movie has that much staying power with you, to where it's practically unconscious, really speaks for a movie's status. And that's not even to mention, the big finale with the throwing the raptor through the skeleton, and then the when dinosaurs ruled the earth banner coming down. That whole shot is just, blockbuster movie orgasm.
Oh yeah.
And yes, everything from the effects to some of the standout characters and the score. Everybody knows that score.
Yes.
I hear you hum that score at least once a week.
It's the Oscars playoff music to me. Whenever he's like, you wrap it up. I do the Jurassic Park
there was that one year, I think it was the 2010 Oscars, when they actually used the Jaws music to play people off.
I remember that, actually. That was great.
But yes, there's a reason that Jurassic Park has the status that it has. Because it works great as a monster movie. It works great as a disaster movie because of the storm. And it just works great as a thriller, even. It's just absolute pure entertainment. Like, it's one of those movies that you really, like, when you hear the phrase movie magic, this is one of the movies that comes to mind immediately.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Did you watch it theatrically? Before now?
In 2013, they did the 3D release.
That's what I'm referring to.
That's when I saw it in theaters. Yeah.
I remember like watching it like at the theater across town, and I remember the Bobcat Goldthwait actually has a bit about this, and it's really true. Like parents were bringing their crying children out of the theater, and that was when you had that little hole in the door where you actually could peek in and see it. And I remember peeking in and seeing the T-Rex. I was like, oh god.
That roar, once you've seen this movie, the T-Rex roar is a sound you never forget.
Oh, God, yes. And that's the reason why Universal really utilizes the Jurassic Park section so to the fullest of their capabilities. And this is literally a battle of Universal right now, old and new. Sadly, Jaws is no longer with us. But
and speaking of Jaws, we can go into it now.
Another great film-going experience we had recently.
Yeah, this is fresh off our viewing. They're all around. They're doing 40th anniversary screenings.
Yep.
And we went to one on Sunday. And yeah, that was fun. Like I knew it would be a theater type of movie, but I had never, because even I'd already seen it like 7 or 8 times before we saw it Sunday. And I was still catching stuff that I like didn't see before. Like the whole thing where Brody keeps bumping his head into stuff. That's just something I never noticed before. And there's a lot of things that I had taken to more than I was able to acknowledge them all the other times I saw it. But seeing it like that, there were things that just a real appreciation grew. But starting with one of the things about it, I guess since this is the start of the movie, we would start with the John Williams score and Spielberg's approach to not showing much. Because the great thing about it was Spielberg. The whole thing about it was the whole less is more thing.
Oh yeah.
But really, in a nutshell, it's just that Spielberg didn't want to show off the fake ass shark too much.
Yeah.
So it's mostly off camera. And it ended up, being like kind of that's what all people try to do now.
Yeah, of course.
Sometimes they love you for it. Sometimes you're Gareth Edwards and they hate you for it. But either way, the way that it works here, and the way it's so memorable and so beloved, is the fact that with the way the music is, with the sound of the music that
oh yeah,
like you immediately hear it in your head as soon as you hear the title of the movie, and you see the point of view shots from the shark. With the combination of those two things, you spend most of the movie feeling like you've already seen the shark when you haven't, and that's the really beautiful thing. And that's why it was really, really scary for people in 1975 when they finally did see the shark, because you thought you had already had that fear in there embedded in you, but then you saw it for real. No matter how fake it looked, you were seeing it for real, and that was when you had the assumption, oh my god, this is my first time seeing it, and now I'm really, really freaked out. Obviously, today's audiences are too, savvy to the whole how fake it looks thing. There's so many different jokes about it, but that's just the way the fact that he still managed to make it work with those techniques really speaks volumes. And it probably, if I had to guess in retrospect, it probably makes, I'm sure the appearances of the shark are much better with those as opposed to, like, if we had just been seeing it without a build-up, this movie probably would have certainly not had the reputation that it has.
No.
But to not give full credit to that, another tremendous thing this has going for it, there's basically 2 things that really, really make Jaws what it is. And that's how Spielberg handles the shark and the dynamic of the 3 main actors. That's the 2 things working together. There's a lot of things to love about the movie, but those 2 working together are really, really what make it what it is. Starting with Roy Scheider. Roy Scheider doesn't really get as much to do with his character. Because the interesting thing about it is Brody is our hero, and we're supposed to, see it through his eyes and his perspective, and Brody is kind of the audience for us. He's kind of like our surrogate in the movie. But we don't really know him prior to this. Like, immediately, as soon as we meet Brody, he is thrust into this situation immediately. So we're not sure. The only thing we see is him doing the accents. And then he's thrust into this situation, and his life is frantic for the rest of the movie. But we do get some moments, like I really like the scene at the dinner table with him and the kid, where they're just doing the father does a gesture, and then the kid mimics it thing, and they're just doing that. that's kind of, they just throw those little things in there like that to make sure he's a character that you can feel connected with, so that he works as your surrogate when the time comes. And of course he does have many contributions, most of which, it's to my understanding that You're Gonna Need a Bigger Boat was an ad-lib. And I love that they brought it back. It's obviously memorable because of the scene where he's throwing the shell in the water, and then we see the shark, and that look on his face as he backs up into the boat. I do love that they brought it back 3 times. Because he says it the one time, and then he says, "Are you sure?" later. And then I love the third one when he's saying, you know, "Are you sure you're not going to..." And the fade into the next scene cuts him off. As if the editing is actually saying, "Yes, Brody, we heard you." I've always loved that. And then we have Robert Shaw's character, who is the character everybody goes to when they talk about it. Which is everything from his introduction. I think we see him like once, just kind of lingering in the background of the scene, but then his ultimate introduction when they're all in the room, and then he scrapes his fingernails down the chalkboard and gets everybody's attention. I don't know how many times that scene has been parodied.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But you have to be incredibly. You'd have to be really incredibly iconic to be parodied as many times as this movie has been. And many others. And pretty much every time he's on... It's kind of like I was talking about with Goldblum. He's basically, only to a much greater degree with Shaw. Every time he's on scene, it generally makes a very memorable moment. Like, he kind of comes in and out there for a while before he's in the movie for, like, its entire, you know... Once they're on the boat and then out, he's there the whole time. But he always leaves that impression. You're always under the impression that he's kind of lingering somewhere. He just kind of leaves you with that feeling every time he's on screen. And of course, the Indianapolis speech that supposedly was written by John Milius and not the screenwriters, but of course worth noting that one of the screenwriters is the guy that wrote the book. And then we have Hooper. Jeez, I'm about to really, really praise him, and I forgot his character name for a second. I really, really got more of an appreciation for Richard Dreyfuss on the theater screen. Because he's basically the comedy relief. Like, there's the really great scene with when they're at the dinner table and Brody isn't eating because this is just too much, and they're all sitting there solemn, and Hooper's he's brought wine and he's well dressed and he's just talking about everything that's going on, and right in mid-thought he just points to Brody's plate and says, "Is anyone eating this?" And then he just kind of drags it over to himself. Like I said, I've seen the movie maybe 7 times prior to that, but that line on Sunday was funnier to me than it's ever been for some reason. I mean, Dreyfuss is just pure gold in this movie. And the thing about it, and it's really great when you know the backstory of how he and Robert Shaw were always like really, really at odds with each other on the set. I guess Dreyfuss was kind of being a diva, and Robert Shaw was going through alcoholism, and these things were not meshing. So a lot of the tension between Hooper and Quint is Dreyfuss and Shaw.
Oh yeah,
for real. And it's great. Apparently one particular story was that obviously Shaw's alcoholism was tending to hold things up. And sometimes there's just some things you don't do to an alcoholic. But Richard Dreyfuss took the drink out of Robert Shaw's hand and threw it off the boat. And I guess it went from there.
That's like grounds for death in some places.
And the 3 of those together, with our kind of comedic character, our very stern character, and the person that kind of represents us and is basically the rock within everything, all coming together make this really great trio that basically made movie history just being together on this boat. Obviously, one of the best scenes in the movie is when they're just in the cabin and just drunk and reminiscing and going through their scars and all that. Shaw's big speech scene is in there also. Um, so, yeah, and the great thing about it was most of them, pretty much almost everybody involved with this movie during filming thought they were making a complete disaster. Apparently, Richard Dreyfuss actually did an interview on TV before the movie came out and told them that he thought the movie was a disaster and that he was terrible in it. But of course, obviously, that was not the case at all. There's another thing that I really love about Dreyfuss that a lot of people don't mention is everybody loves the speech with Quint. But the thing that I love is it's such a great moment, and Shaw is so great in it, that you watch Dreyfuss in that scene, and throughout this whole scene, on one side of the screen, you have Shaw giving the speech, and on the other side of it, it's just Dreyfuss watching him, but he's watching him with this look of awe on his face that never changes. And I think that's almost just as impressive as the whole speech that Shaw's going through. And how it plays through in the scene in one big shot. I think really, really adds to it a lot more in a way than he's given credit for. There's a lot of really memorable scenes apart from that. I love the way they built suspense with the first beach scene after the first attack, where they're just dismissing it as a boat accident, and Birdie's just really keeping an eye on everything, and there's always something that looks like trouble, and then it's not. And then that eventually builds to the shark being in the one place they don't think it is. And there's other side characters that make it really memorable, like the mayor, who's really, really slimy, and I love his shirt with the anchors.
He reminds me of John Michael Higgins, too. If the movie would have been done now, he would definitely be the one playing this guy.
And then there's the kid that gets eaten. His mom that one very memorable scene where she shows up in the black veil and like slaps Birdie because he knew that a shark was in the water and didn't tell anybody. Just a whole lot of magic came and made this movie together. Ben Gardner's head is a big scare for a lot of people. Where Spielberg was actually afraid he got a bigger scare with that than he did with the shark, because that's the one moment where you're kind of not expecting something, because you're so distracted by Hooper finding the tooth. You're not expecting the head to show up, and you're really not expecting that level of gore. The level of gore in this movie is surprisingly fierce.
Oh yeah.
For I know PG was different in 1975, but still, in that era also it was. I mean, you had your Italian horror movies that were doing God knows what, but for a movie like this that a lot of people were gonna see, you wouldn't expect that. But of course, it totally paid off, because the incredible feat that this movie accomplished, being the original blockbuster, where they released it in the big cities, and everybody was going to see it. So somebody finally said, why don't we try releasing it everywhere and see how that turns out? And then the summer blockbuster became a thing.
That's how Paranormal Activity came to be later on in life. It started out as small, and then they made it wide.
And to back up the story with Dreyfuss saying, I think it's going to be a disaster on TV, there was a witness that was doing an interview, and apparently everybody had come out of the first screening, and all the reactions had happened, and the applause and everything. And after the screening, Richard Dreyfuss was standing in the street, jumping up and down, celebrating.
That's awesome.
So, yes, this is definitely, and the Oscars took to it too. It was nominated for Best Picture and it won the coveted editing. It won sound, and of course it won score. So, and it's become just this staple of movie, not just horror movies, not just, monster movies to an extent, just movies in general.
Oh, yeah.
It was a huge, tremendous thing, and just broke ground for everything. And it's the reason we have every other Spielberg movie that we got. So, yes. And I would say, I really, really like Jurassic Park a lot. I think it's definitely one of the very definitions of movie magic. It's especially impressive that he made a fun adventure movie like this the same year he made Schindler's List. That in itself is unthinkable. But, without even hesitating, I can say that I would take Jaws any day, choosing between the two. But that's just, that just speaks to how great Jaws is. That
Yeah,
says nothing derogatory about Jurassic Park by any means. So,
I could say personally that it was great seeing my first time to watch the movie was on the big screen. I thought that's probably how it should have been. So yeah, this is a great battle between two Universal icons. So that's what we've got for this week for Versus. Next week we're gonna tone it down a little bit, but we're gonna amp up the violence level here. So your code name for next week is Killer. And that's gonna kick us into July. Yes, it's already July. It's crazy, isn't it? In a couple of days, it'll literally be July. So tomorrow, we will bring you the worst of 2015 half-year video that's coming your way, as well as our podcast, our Raw podcast with Ashley, Aaron, and myself. And later tonight, if you are a TNA fan, you can check our Slammiversary podcast at 11 p.m. on this network. So yeah, check it out. So that being said, we've got Terminator Genesis, Magic Mike XXL, and Faith of Our Fathers coming up for AJ's movie reviews next week. Got a lot of content coming, normal sip and snack, got wrestling content. Stay tuned for that. Horror Nights news whenever we get any. So that being said, thank you guys and girls out there for watching. AJ, any parting words?